The reason the big attempts don't hold isn't that you're not trying hard enough. It isn't consistency. It isn't willpower. It isn't that you haven't found the right rule yet. It's something more specific than that. And once you see it, the 5 things in this video will make a different kind of sense. Most of what parents try when they feel the distance growing is structured around removal. Take the device, set the limit, establish the rule, create the consequence. And most of the time, not always, but most of the time, something in that attempt collapses. The child pushes back harder than expected. The parent gives in under pressure. It holds for 4 days and then it doesn't. And now there are 2 problems instead of 1. The distance and the evidence gathered through your own attempts that the big moves don't work. If that's where you are, this video is not going to ask you to try the big thing again. It's going to offer something smaller. And smaller in this specific situation is not a consolation prize. It is actually the correct repair strategy, and there's a reason for that, which this video will explain. 5 things. Specific. Achievable within 48 hours. None of them require your child to put the screen down first. Let's start with what's actually happening in the room when the big move collapses. Here's what happens in your child's nervous system when the device is removed as the opening move of repair. The brain reads restriction as threat, not metaphorically, neurologically. In a child whose reward system has been calibrated to the dopamine pattern of a screen, sudden removal activates the same stress response as any other perceived loss of safety. The prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for reasoning, for hearing what you're actually saying, for understanding that you love them, goes partially offline. What's left online is the part that fights back. So the argument that follows isn't really about the phone. It's a nervous system in threat response encountering a nervous system in frustration. And 2 nervous systems in that state cannot repair a relationship. They can only survive the moment. This is not a verdict on your approach. This is what the research on adolescent threat response consistently shows. Perceived autonomy restriction in a teenager activates the same neural circuits as physical danger. The reaction feels disproportionate because the reaction is not about the phone. It is about the brain registering a loss of control and responding accordingly. Which means the subtraction-first model of repair was always working against a biological current. Not because you were wrong to try it, because no one explained what was actually happening in the room when you did. You already know this part isn't the whole picture. You've read enough to know that limits matter, that structure matters, that complete permissiveness isn't the answer either. That's true. This video isn't arguing against limits, it's arguing for sequence. The reason the large attempts collapse isn't that they're wrong in principle. It's that they were attempted before the relational ground was stable enough to hold them. You were trying to build a wall before the foundation existed, and the foundation, the thing that makes any limit livable for a child, is connection. That's what the 5 things are actually building. So before we get to the 5 things themselves, let's talk about why they work. There's a concept in attachment research that doesn't get nearly enough attention in the parenting content space. It's called a bid for connection. A bid is any small attempt, verbal or nonverbal, to make contact with another person. A question, a touch on the shoulder, sitting near someone, laughing at something they said. Children make bids constantly, and so do parents. The research, originally from work on adult partnerships, later extended to parent-child dynamics, shows something important. The ratio of bids made to bids responded to is one of the strongest predictors of relational closeness over time. Not the big conversations, not the family meetings, not the screens-down dinners. The small, unremarkable moments of attempted contact and whether they land. Here's what that means for the situation you're actually in. Your child is not entirely behind the screen. They're still making bids, smaller ones than they used to, more defended, easier to miss. A glance, a comment dropped in your direction without quite looking at you. A question that sounds casual, but is actually an opening. And what the 5 things in this video are designed to do is this. Increase the number of bids you make that don't require the screen to go away first, and increase the likelihood that your child responds to them. Not because that's the whole repair, but because that's where repair begins, in the nervous system's registration that contact is safe. That you are not only present when there's a limit to enforce, that your presence doesn't automatically mean a fight. Once that registers, once the child's nervous system has enough data to conclude that your presence is not a threat, the ground shifts. Not dramatically, not overnight, but the conversations that used to escalate begin to de-escalate a degree earlier. The silences change their quality. The device goes down a few minutes sooner without being asked. That's the process. Small contact, repeated, ground becoming more stable, larger conversations becoming possible. The 5 things are the first layer of that process. Now let's talk about what those 5 things actually are. None of these require a single conversation about the phone. That's not an accident. The first thing, be in the room without an agenda, not to monitor, not to enforce, not to eventually say something about how long they've been on it, just to be there. Physically proximate, doing something of your own. 10 minutes. That's all. What this does at the neurological level, it begins to decouple your physical presence from the anticipation of conflict. Right now, for many children in this situation, a parent entering the room while they're on a screen activates a low-grade threat signal. Presence with no agenda, repeated, begins to quiet that signal. You're not doing nothing. You're doing the precondition for everything else. The second thing, make one observation with no follow-up question. Not, what are you watching, which reads as surveillance, something more specific. That looked intense. You laughed. What happened? One sentence. No follow-up required. No expectation of a conversation. What this does, it signals attentiveness without demand. The child doesn't have to lower their guard to respond. A one-word answer is a complete response, and a one-word answer is contact. One-word answers over time become two-word answers. The third thing, share something small from your own day without asking about theirs. This one feels counterintuitive. The instinct is to ask, to open a door for them to walk through, but a question puts the social weight on the child. A brief share, something strange happened today, puts the weight on you. It models the very thing you're hoping for, the willingness to put something real into the space between you, and it removes the pressure that makes most children go quiet. The fourth thing, find one thing they care about and learn one true thing about it. Not to like it, not to participate in it. To understand it well enough to say one thing that demonstrates real attention. This is harder than it sounds. It requires setting aside the instinct to evaluate. But what a child registers when a parent makes this effort, even briefly, even imperfectly, is, I exist to them as someone with a world worth noticing. That is not a small registration. That is the foundation of being reachable. The fifth thing, end one day with physical presence that has no conversational requirement. Sit on the edge of the bed. Stand in the doorway for a moment. A hand on the shoulder that doesn't ask for anything back. Not a lecture. Not a check-in. Not, we need to talk. Just, I'm here. You don't have to do anything with that. The research on attachment consistently shows that physical proximity during low-demand moments is one of the most reliable regulators of a child's baseline sense of safety with a caregiver. You don't have to say anything important. You just have to be there without requiring it to become something. None of these are dramatic. None of them will feel like a breakthrough on the day you try them. That's exactly the point. Repair at this scale doesn't announce itself. It accumulates. And one day you realize the accumulation has changed something. If this is landing, if the idea of small daily contact feels like something you could actually sustain, there's a guide in the description that goes one layer deeper into this. It's called the 10-Minute Connection Reset. It's built around exactly the principle this video introduced. Daily micro-actions, each under 10 minutes, designed specifically for the parent who doesn't have the bandwidth for a full protocol, but wants to keep the distance from growing. It's in the description whenever you're ready for it. Now, there's one thing that stops most parents before they even try this, and we need to talk about it honestly. There is one thing that stops most parents before they start with any of this, and it's worth naming directly. Because it's real. My own phone use makes me a hypocrite. Who am I to try to rebuild connection when I'm half absent myself? Here is the honest answer to that. You are not required to be resolved before you reach toward your child. Repair does not begin when you have achieved the consistency you're aiming for. It begins when you make the first bid. A parent who's still figuring out their own relationship with their phone, who reaches toward their child anyway, imperfectly, incompletely, is doing something real. That something registers, not as hypocrisy, as effort. Children are not watching for perfection, they are watching for the attempt. The research on repair in attachment relationships between adults, between parents and children, is consistent on this point. The repair doesn't require the damaging behavior to have stopped entirely. It requires demonstration that the relationship is being prioritized, even partially, even imperfectly. A parent who was on their phone less than yesterday and closer than last week is in repair. That is enough to begin. So here is the specific question to sit with after this video. Of the 5 things: being present without agenda, making one observation, sharing something small, learning one true thing about what they care about, ending a day with physical presence, which one feels most possible tomorrow? Not the hardest one, not the most transformative one, the most possible one. Start there. One thing, not everything. Because one thing done is the beginning of a direction. And direction is what breaks the paralysis that brought you here. The 10-minute connection reset is in the description. A guide built for exactly the parent who just found a foothold here and wants to keep it. It's there whenever the timing is right. Of the 5 things in this video, which one feels most possible to try in the next 48 hours? And which one feels hardest? And why? Repair doesn't look like the picture most parents carry of it. It doesn't arrive as a single conversation that resets everything. It doesn't come with a moment where the screen disappears and connection rushes in to fill the space. It looks like a Tuesday evening where you sat in the same room without needing it to become anything. And your child glanced up once, and you were there to receive it. That's it. That's the whole thing in its smallest form. And that smallest form, repeated, is the actual path back. You came to this video carrying the particular weight of having tried and stopped, of knowing what needs to happen and feeling too defeated by the gap to start again. That weight is real. The exhaustion under it is real. And none of the 5 things in this video ask you to pretend otherwise. They ask only this: one bid, tomorrow. To the child who is already in your house, already closer than the distance makes them feel, already waiting, not consciously, not in any way they could articulate, for the contact to feel safe again. You don't need to be the parent who got this right from the beginning. You need to be the parent who on an ordinary day reached toward their child when it would have been easier not to. That parent exists in you. It's why you watched this. One thing, not everything, not a system, not a protocol. One small bid made with the understanding that it is not nothing. The child who is still there, they don't need a perfect parent. They need a present one. Those are not the same thing. And the difference between them is exactly the size of one small thing, tried once, on a day that looked ordinary. Keep going.